Let me finish with this question so that I don't take more of your time.
Yeah.
You've been very generous with your time. What would you say, having gone through, I think, a number of different communities? Um, this is a question very dear to my heart. The level of, and I distinguish here between being academic and being an intellectual.
Yeah.
Do you think we need more intellectuals in our communities? That's one. What's your assessment of our potential to have those intellectuals in our communities? And what more can be done if you do agree that more intellectuals are needed to step up and to fill in where the need is, through whether it's through academia or through more advanced traditional Islamic studies? Do we have enough? And if not, what's missing? What do we need to be doing? And is it more of a collective effort? Is it more of an individual effort? Is it more, what's missing? So that we have more intellectuals, people who can step up and deal with life issues, more pragmatic. I think we've spent a lot of time talking about very academic topics. And I think this is where the discussion took us. And inshallah, in the future, we'll talk about more life, day-to-day questions and issues. But we need those people to step up and address them. What do you think is missing right now? What else can we be doing as a community? And what is your assessment of communities in general, at least those that you have interacted with?
Well, first of all, I want to say that, look, I truly believe, as someone who works even within an Islamic school, that whatever knowledge we have to be able to distill it in such a way that it is discernible and understandable to a grade 5 child. We have to be able to do that. We have to be able to distill ideas. We have to be able to understand that every place that we're in has a different requirement. Right? قُولُوا مَعَ النَّاسِ عَلَى قَدْرِ عُقُولِهِمْ. Right? That you speak to people to the degree of their intellect, not to mean that they're not intellectual, but they may not be specialists in that subject, right? So one, we don't patronize people. We try not to do that, of course, not intentionally, of course, ever. And two, we have to, at the end of the day, see, we've spoken a lot about intellectual things. Obviously, a lot of my lectures don't deal with anything that I've spoken about here, because that's very much my writing, my intellectual, not my intellectual side, but my intellectual writing or whatever you want to call it. As far as the other side goes, I think that we need to make tradition relevant today. Tradition, history, the legacy of tradition, and the sacrality of that tradition needs to come out. It needs to be made relevant, and we need to speak with very clear voices about these issues. And this is where one of the things that I believe is extremely important is the traditional studies is, of course, extremely important. But to supplement that with a very profound understanding, or at least a somewhat of an understanding of continental philosophy, we need to have an understanding of what has gone on the European continent itself, before the Americas, the European continent. We need to have an understanding of, again, the certain concepts and ideas that are being thrown around in our community, such as liberalism, such as contact, that was then and this is now. When we're using words like this, but the Prophet was at his time and not my time, or I find that to be unfair, or these kinds of things like that, we have to be able to deal with this in a more rigorous way than just simply saying that that's haram. We have to go beyond that. We have to have a deeper understanding of the needs of our time, and that is to provide convincing arguments for the rationality and necessity of tradition as it is. And by that, I would, by extension, al-marja'iyya, as the kind of archetype or paradigmatic manifestation or example of tradition. And I'm not putting that in air quotes because I believe it to be something sacred. So as you can see, I'm not using air quotes for that, because that would be a snide remark to make. I'm careful in that regard. I mean that in a real, true way, and to appreciate that tradition. And in order to do that, we need to, I think, focus on root causes as opposed to symptoms. Sometimes we focus a lot, by we, I mean the collective we, not me and not you, the collective we focus a lot on what we see as the problems in the community, the symptoms of these. We focus on symptoms without getting to the kind of root of the problem. And I guess that's where it connects back to my academic writing as well, in the sense that if we don't understand the history of that idea, how we got here, we won't be able to deal with the symptom, right? With the cause itself. We have to go to the suburb and the cause of it, or at least the ratio legis, the precipitative cause, as we would say, right? The illah of it itself. And when we get to that, then we can start identifying, there's a foundational cleavage here between a godly approach and a materialistic approach. And that requires thinking. But then what we have to do is we have to be able to distill that in a way that is discernible and understandable for both children, young adults, and older adults. We have to distill that in a way, and I think one of the ways some people who are doing this very well are people like Sheikh Hamza Yusuf and others from the Sunni community, who, for example, are putting Ghazali into a children version. Yes. We don't have anything like that. But obviously they've have invested millions or hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions into these projects, and they're paying top scholars to work on this. They're not just finding somebody to work on it on a weekend. That requires a vision. And to that effect, the institute, inshallah, that we're starting in Toronto, I hope will be a foundation for that. Not that it's the only institute. There are institutes in the UK, such as the Shia Institute and others, but within a North American environment, I think it will serve, inshallah, in the coming years as a foundation for this work to occur within an academic environment with the search for haqq and truth at the front and center. So not from a humanistic or atheistic kind of approach, not studying Islam as a human phenomena, but as a truth itself, right? And beginning to look at issues in a deeper way. And then we need all kinds of experts to help distill that, synthesize that for the average person to understand. And that can be done through media, that can be done through books, that can be done through movies, that can be done through any multitude of ways. But that requires a very kind of deep vision of people that are devoted to knowledge, that believe that knowledge is essentially important. Now, this goes much beyond the majalis now. Much beyond the majalis.
Yeah, this becomes a social project.
This becomes a social project. And we will see the people that have always pushed social projects are always the intellectuals at the top. Look at someone like Foucault. Look at someone like, Foucault or Derrida or people like this, so-called fathers of postmodernism. As Charles Taylor points out very well in his Malaise of Modernity, as well as in The Secular Age to an extent in there, that what we take for granted today began with seeds planted by people like Michel Foucault and others. Or people like, who's the one who wrote on existentialism?
Sartre?
No, the other guy, what's his name, on existentialism. Anyways, now I'm not remembering. Their names are not important. The Kalam of Ahlul Bayt is more important for us to remember, the ulama of Ahlul Bayt, right? Yes. But anyhow, the people that wrote on existentialism, the people who wrote on these different issues, which then became derivatives of that in different ways, became the kind of commonplace thinking. We need to understand that link and how that link works, and we need to be visionaries in that regard, right? And this is where I think we are lacking. We are behind, really behind the wheel here. I mean, not behind the wheel. We're not even in the car. Leave aside being behind the wheel. We're not even riding in the car. We're having trouble just getting out of our cultural ghettos to deal with the real issues. I mean, we're so caught up with issues of asabiya and all kinds of tribal nonsense amongst ourselves that we don't see that the house is already on fire. And nor do we have the water or the fire hose or the firemen to treat it, because we don't even know where to start sometimes, because we're coming at it often from a post-colonial and inferior perspective. We see ourselves sometimes as unworthy of dealing with these issues. We see ourselves sometimes as being, oh, we can't deal with that. That's that's too luxurious. That's too, that's too much thinking. It's too philosophical for us, right? And if we remain in that way of thinking, I think we're going to have a very big problem, because we won't be able to develop the thinkers of the 21st century who have both a traditional background and an understanding of the issues that are going on in this continent. So we need more initiatives in that regard. Yeah, inshallah.